Well, today you join me standing in the farm pond at Ocklinch Farm, looking at the Ocklinch farmhouse, or at least I would have been a couple of 100 years ago. But that's about all that's left of the farm now. And today I'm going in search of the Burne, or the Bourne stream, which gives its name to the town of Eastbourn. A little bit more is explained later. I can't take you exactly where the source is in Mottcombe Gardens because we're not allowed in, but I can show you. This is the pond that's left, all that's left of the Ocklinch Farm pond, and there is the source of the Bourne stream from which Eastbourn gets its name. And I want to draw your attention to the statue of Neptune here. And that stood in the mill pond further downstream, which I'll talk more about later on, and was moved from here when public access to the old pond down there was removed and it was all built over and what have you. And I'm sorry, that's the closest I can take you now. The source of the River Bourne. So this is where it all began. Well, the modern day settlement as we know it, because obviously there have been Iron Age settlements and that on the downs for many years before that. You can see that nice view across the bowling green to the parish church in Old Town, St Mary's. This is the historical bit of Eastbourne that people tend not to come round to. There's a mixture of ancient and modern here in Mottcombe Road in terms of the architecture, and although I'm very sad to see that any blue plaque that should have been there has been removed. That, number 7, as I understand it, was Tommy Cooper's house here. He mainly lived in Chiswick, but he had his little retreat. Another one of those sad towers, unfortunately, that behind the public face of a man who even now makes me laugh. He's only got to appear on the screen. A life of tragedy, but I won't go into that out of respect for his family. And we're coming up now to where the Star Brewery was. As you can see, modern houses that don't really fit the style of the original buildings here. But those down that little side road do. And then we come to one of the oldest buildings here. This is the Lamb Inn, parts of which date back to 1180. And it's said that there are cellars underneath the Lamb Inn that lead under the churchyard here and into the old parsonage barn. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a walk through the churchyard, which is looking a little bit unkempt at the moment. But anyway, if you want a time check, it's about 6:05 on a Sunday morning. Normally I think the priest would be up and about. Not today. And here is the old parsonage barn, where those cellars are supposed to be ending up. There, the old parsonage barn. You very often find in this part of the country a connection between the church and smuggling. I think what you have to remember is that the vicars were not necessarily religious in those days. They were often second or third sons of the nobility who didn't go into the military. So they became vicars and could have quite a comfortable life. I think that building is flats now. But this is the 12th century Church of St Mary. A more modern addition, giving a covered walkway to this lovely the pilgrims. Pilgrim's house. But this was the beginning of the South Downs Way, and I guess a lot of pilgrims going along the coast, coming down from Canterbury, heading towards Chichester, might well have been grateful of the chance to stay for the night in this building. Anyway, carry on with our walk through. I can't unfortunately look at anything much closer because of the lockdown, but I have this nice little walled garden this side. This is rather nice. Complete with the Lord of the Manor there, look. Thinking to himself, what's he doing up at this time of the morning? Would that be the original fat cat, do you think? One thing about a slightly overcast morning, as we walk through this lovely avenue of trees here, is that it means I can see the LED screen clearer. I'm guessing in here, where there are these little flowers, by the looks of it, I'd say this is where ashes have been interned over the years. Anyway, walk up here past another one of these old flint and brick buildings, and you'll notice that ironwork S on the wall there. You'll find these in a lot of old Sussex buildings. They are there because Sussex people used to be very, very religious and superstitious, and you put one of those on your house to ward off evil spirits.
Now I'm just going to pause here because as far as those symbols are concerned, not everything is as it seems. I was always given to understand from a very young age that especially the S shapes, the shape of the serpent, were there to ward off evil spirits. However, I have since been told that at various times in a building's history, metal supporting rods would have been needed in order to strengthen the building, and those little shapes that we see on the wall were put on the end of those rods. I'm wondering if there was a combination of the two, in that when these rods were inserted, instead of just having a plain end cap showing on the outside wall, they took the opportunity to make these shapes to ward off evil spirits as part of that work. I'm open to suggestions as to what is the truth.
Now we come to the main road out of Eastbourne towards Brighton. And there's the Edgeman Baptist, I think it's a Baptist chapel up there, dating back to 1892, and up on the top there is more 1930s. It's a pub called Tally Ho, a restaurant and that now. Actually got nothing to do with horse riding, as the name might suggest. The Tally Ho was a collier, and it went down off the coast of Eastbourne with its cargo of coal. The old buildings in Eastbourne here were knocked down in the late 60s. And early 70s. There's been a lot of these, what I call sporty hatchbacks about this morning, driven by young men. They've probably been out on the tiles all night, like the best cats in the world. This was a very narrow road, very narrow at its time. Again, explain more about that later, but here is the 12th century Church of St Mary in Greensand. Stands on the site of an earlier Saxon church, though very little of that remains. Leading down to the Lamb Inn on the corner. Very pleasant retirement homes here on the right now. I'm finding it very hard to remember the road as it was before they rebuilt. I seem to remember these walls were higher because they built the level of the road up. And I think Yes, they took away a lot of the pavement from the other side. Basically moved the whole road this way, because you can see as we walk by in a moment, you'll be able to see when I walk the other side, the railings where the original road would have come round the corner, and you see how they flattened the curve off. And at this point we go to the studio. Just bringing you this very quickly from the studio. Several photographs of the Old Town area that I need to back up what you'll see on video. Here you're looking at the street map of Eastbourne, and you'll see I've done a big thick felt pen line where the original course of the Bourne stream would have gone, starting from the big blob at the top, which is in Motcombe Gardens. You'll see that it flowed down through the farmyard and then down of course to the other next little blob, which was the little, as you could call it, mill pond area, which was quite pretty. You'll see a photograph of that later on, where actually people were able to go and walk, fish and enjoy themselves. That was behind what is now Henry's, what was the Holy Rosary Convent School. The mill itself stood up near more where Michel Grove is, and on the Upperton Road. Hard to believe there was a mill there and a pond, looking at all the building that's been there now, and of course the Bourne stream has virtually disappeared into pipework, which it then did anyway down at the junction of the Goss and Upperton Road. You'll see it ran down behind and underneath Southfield Road to the next big blob, which was a large pond that they had until early in the 20th century, down on the ground where the Central Library now stands, funnily enough. It then wound its way along what is now Ashford Road, through Tideswell Road, and down into Seaside, probably coming out somewhere near where the Marine stands now, or between the Marine and the Crown, where it would empty out into marsh because it wasn't strong enough to find a way through the silted up beach and out into the sea by itself. It had to be helped out by a little drainage culvert. Now you see from the white line that the black pen line that I've put in there, you'll see it is in pipe work under Ashford Road, along the back of Cavendish Avenue until up behind Cortlands Road, where it surfaces again and runs as part of the drainage ditches on the Horsley levels underneath Lockbridge Drove, and along to an end-on junction where it drains out into Prince's Park in the sea, in a video which we shall see later on. And here's Motcombe Gardens. This is where the Bourne stream rises, one of those freshwater springs that are such a part of chalk downland, and this really is where current day Eastbourne began, in a settlement known as Burne, and then Bourne, and then Eastbourne to distinguish it from a settlement in West Sussex by the name of Westbourne. And here is the Old Star Brewery. I'm told the ales were very good, but I never got the chance to drink any. Unfortunately, I arrived in Eastbourne too late. But this was one of the sights that greeted me when I first arrived here. Very sad, run down, neglected, ready for redevelopment. It had a little pub attached to it on the other side called the Star Shades. And here it is. That would have been a lovely little pub to be refurbished and redeveloped. And well, such a shame that it had to go. There is still a pub there, which you'll see later on, called the Star Inn. Not the same, didn't look as nice. This would have been lovely. They could have redeveloped it and put a little terrace or something outside, gardens where people could come and enjoy themselves, but people wanted money more. This, I'm given to understand, is the old Ocklinge Mill. I somehow have my doubts. It looks almost too rural, even for 1800 and something. But it would mean Upperton Road is behind us and the Goss is down the hill on the other side.
although the downs do look the right sort of shape for that background. And this is a drawing of the mill pond as it would have been. Somebody there sitting, fishing, and probably would have been a very nice tranquil spot for people to go and take a nice little walk. All gone now, of course. So then we move on to a few views of Eastbourne as it is now. Before the redevelopment, we had a cinema in Old Town. The Old Town Cinema. That must have been a grand place in its time. There were two little side roads that went down at the time, Star Road and Baker's Road, and I think that was Star Road leading down to the Star Shades Inn. When I arrived in Eastbourne, it had turned into this view coming up. And that's how it stayed until probably the mid-70s, because I can remember standing at the bus stop behind that Triumph Herald there, and on wet nights sheltering in the old shop doorway, waiting to go home from having a night at either the Crown Folk Club or the Lamb Folk Club. But as I say, that was certainly how things were until getting on for the mid to late 70s. Rather an upsetting view. Right at the top end of Church Street, we had this, which in my day was St Mary's Hospital, then converted into flats, Leatherenden Place, I think they call it now. And before being St Mary's Hospital, this was the cavalry barracks that was built to house the troops that came to man the Martello Towers around about the late 18th, early 19th century. And moving further on into the 19th century, this is how the High Street used to look. And yes, this is the High Street. It still is the High Street because this was the original town of Eastbourne before development moved round to the railway station area after the coming of the iron rails. Very cramped and crowded, as you'll see, but very busy. Moving on to the early years of this century, difficult to date it, probably late 20s maybe. You'll see how narrow the road is coming down the hill past the church and on that sharp turn into the High Street. Caused problems for motor vehicles later on, and especially buses, because two buses couldn't get past each other there. We had a rule that when you came down the hill, and you'll see here very clearly what I mean by the narrow width of the road. This has got to be late 60s because the chimney of the Star Brewery is still there behind the Lamb, and also you can see the tops of the buildings that were behind the Lamb Inn at the time. This all went very well until 1965, when one day a corporation bus coming down the hill saw nothing coming up, carried on as he was perfectly entitled to do, and then the southbound bus, which suddenly appeared out of nowhere, decided he wasn't going to stop, and as he went round the tight corner, clipped the side of the corporation bus, which sent the bus into the side of the Lamb Inn. And, that's another story, but little piece of history for you.